For almost 4 billion years, life on Earth shared a secret. Every creature died, but none of them knew it. Dinosaurs didn't know. Mammoths didn't know. The countless animals that lived and disappeared across millions of years didn't spend their days wondering how much time they had left. They simply lived. Then something changed. Somewhere in the distant past, one species developed a terrifying new ability, the ability to imagine the future. And with it came a realization that may have changed everything. One day, I am going to die. Not tomorrow, not next year, but eventually. And the strange thing is, we don't know exactly when humans first understood this. We don't know who the first person was. We don't know where they lived. We don't know what they looked like. But we know they existed, because once that realization appeared, humanity was never the same again. In fact, every religion you've ever heard of, every empire, every monument, every tomb, every family photo, every attempt to leave a legacy, may trace back to a single thought that entered the human mind tens of thousands of years ago. A thought that no creature should have been able to think, and the evidence for this idea is buried in places you would never expect. But before we get there, we need to answer a strange question. How do you know you're going to die? It sounds ridiculous. Of course you know you're going to die. Everyone does. But that's not actually true. You weren't born knowing it. Neither was anyone else. Psychologists have found that children don't understand death all at once. They build the idea slowly. First, they learn that dead things stop moving. Then they learn that death is permanent. Then they realize that all living things eventually die. And finally comes the most unsettling realization of all. I die too. That final step changes everything. Because understanding mortality isn't simply learning a fact. It's learning something about yourself. It's realizing that your future has an ending. And once that idea enters your mind, it never completely leaves. Which raises a fascinating question. If every child must learn mortality, when did humanity learn it? Was there a first person who truly understood death? And if there was, what did that realization feel like? Imagine a child sitting beside a fire 70,000 years ago. The night is cold. The tribe is quiet. An elder has died. Maybe a grandparent. Maybe a parent. The body lies nearby, still, silent, gone. The child stares. Animals can recognize death. Elephants sometimes linger near bones. Certain primates appear disturbed by the loss of companions. But what if this child understands something more? What if they realize something no creature before them fully grasped? If this happened to them, it can happen to me. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to everyone. For the first time, a mind may have looked beyond the present moment and seen its own ending. And if that happened, that child may have instantly become the strangest creature on Earth, because evolution had prepared animals for predators, for starvation, for injury, but it had never prepared a creature to understand mortality. And that's where the mystery begins, because once humans became aware of death, something unexpected happened. Humanity didn't collapse into despair. Instead, it became more creative, more symbolic, more ambitious, more obsessed with meaning. Why? The answer may begin underground. When archaeologists discover ancient bones, they're not just studying how people lived, they're studying how people thought. And sometimes the dead reveal something extraordinary, because ancient humans didn't always abandon their dead. In many cases, they buried them, carefully, deliberately, sometimes with tools, sometimes with ornaments, sometimes with objects that seem to have had meaning. Think about what that requires. A burial takes time, energy, resources. For hunter-gatherers struggling to survive, every calorie mattered. So why spend precious effort on someone who could no longer contribute to the group? The obvious answer is grief, but grief alone may not explain everything. A burial suggests that death mattered, that the dead remained important even after life had ended. And perhaps most importantly, it suggests that humans were beginning to think beyond the immediate present. Because a burial is not just about the dead, it's about the living. It's a statement, a ritual, a symbol, and symbols change everything. Because symbols allow humans to think about things that don't physically exist: the future, the past, gods, nations, money, and perhaps most importantly, the self. Imagine living entirely in the present moment. No plans, no long-term goals, no thoughts about 10 years from now, no worries about retirement, no dreams about the future. Most animals live this way, but humans don't. Humans possess an extraordinary ability, sometimes called mental time travel. We can revisit the past. We can imagine future scenarios. We can mentally experience events that haven't happened yet. This ability is one of the greatest advantages our species ever evolved. It allows planning, preparation, innovation. Civilization itself may depend on it. But hidden inside this gift is a terrible side effect, because once you can imagine tomorrow, you can imagine a tomorrow without you. The same brain that allows humans to plan for the future also allows humans to imagine death. In a strange way, mortality awareness may have emerged accidentally. It wasn't the goal, it was the consequence. Evolution created a brain capable of imagining possibilities, and one of those possibilities was non-existence. Humans became the first creatures capable of predicting their own disappearance, and that realization may have transformed the entire trajectory of our species. The problem no animal has think about it. A lion fears danger, but it doesn't fear turning 80. A deer runs from predators, but it doesn't lie awake wondering whether its life has meaning. Humans face a unique problem. We know our lives are temporary, and yet we continue living as though our actions matter. Why? Why get married? Why build businesses? Why create art? Why raise children? Why write books? Why explore space? Why spend decades working toward goals that might never be completed? The answer may be one of the deepest truths about human psychology, because mortality doesn't just create fear, it creates purpose. Imagine if you had infinite time. Would today matter? Would you call your friends? Would you chase your dreams? Would you finish anything? Maybe not. Part of what makes life meaningful is that it ends. A song matters because it finishes. A sunset matters because it fades. A life matters because it is limited. And humans seem to understand this instinctively, even if we rarely talk about it. Humanity's greatest defense, but awareness of death creates another problem. How do you live knowing that one day you'll be gone? This question may have shaped nearly every culture in history. Consider religion. Across continents and centuries, humans repeatedly developed beliefs about what happens after death. Different answers, different stories, different traditions, yet the same underlying question. What happens when life ends? Now consider monuments. Why do people build structures designed to outlive them? Why carve names into stone? Why preserve photographs? Why write memoirs? Why record family histories? Why leave something behind? Because humans appear to possess a powerful desire for symbolic immortality. If we can't live forever physically, perhaps we can continue through our ideas, our children, our achievements, our stories. And this may explain one of the strangest facts about human behavior. The closer we get to death, the more many people focus on legacy, as though some part of us refuses to disappear quietly. Psychologists have spent decades studying what happens when people think about mortality, and the results are fascinating. When people are reminded of death, subtle changes often occur. They become more protective of their beliefs, more attached to their identities, more concerned with meaning, more motivated to leave a mark. It's as if mortality awareness activates something deep within the human mind, a need to matter, a need to belong, a need to feel connected to something larger than oneself, which leads to a startling possibility. What if much of human civilization is not simply about survival? What if it's also about managing the psychological consequences of mortality? What if culture itself is partly a response to death? At first, that sounds absurd, but the more you examine human history, the harder it becomes to ignore. Imagine a group of humans sitting around a fire. No cities, no writing, no technology, just darkness and stars. Someone begins telling a story. Maybe it's about ancestors. Maybe it's about spirits. Maybe it's about where people go after death. The details don't matter. What matters is that stories accomplish something extraordinary. They connect individuals to something larger. Stories transform random events into meaningful narratives, and humans seem to crave meaning. Not because meaning helps us survive physically, but because it helps us survive psychologically. When mortality enters the picture, meaning becomes essential. Without meaning, death feels unbearable. With meaning, death becomes part of a larger story. And perhaps that's why storytelling became one of humanity's most powerful inventions, not just entertainment, a survival mechanism for self-aware minds. Here's something even stranger. Mortality may also explain love. Think about it. If humans lived forever, relationships would feel very different. Part of what makes people precious is that time is limited. You only get so many conversations, so many birthdays, so many sunsets together. Scarcity creates value, and nothing is more scarce than time. In a paradoxical way, awareness of death may deepen our appreciation of life. The knowledge that moments end makes moments matter. The knowledge that people leave makes people precious. And the knowledge that life is temporary makes love feel urgent. Perhaps mortality didn't just create fear. Perhaps it also created gratitude. Somewhere in prehistory, a human being had a thought. We don't know who they were. We don't know their name. We don't know what language they spoke. But they may have experienced the most important realization in human history. One day, I will die. That thought may have changed everything. It may have inspired rituals, stories, religion, art, civilizations, philosophy, science, perhaps even this video. Because once humans became aware of death, they began searching for answers. And that search never ended. Every generation inherited the same question. Every culture developed its own response. Every individual eventually confronts the same reality. And yet, something remarkable happened. Instead of surrendering to despair, humanity built meaning. We created families, communities, dreams, discoveries, masterpieces. We transformed mortality into motivation. And maybe that's the strangest part of all. The realization that should have broken us may have been the thing that made us human. Somewhere, tens of thousands of years ago, a human looked at death and truly understood what it meant. We don't know where it happened. We don't know when it happened. We don't know who that person was. But we know the consequences because we're living inside them. Every city, every book, every song, every monument, every scientific breakthrough, every story ever told may be part of humanity's ongoing conversation with mortality. A conversation that began long before history and continues today. Because despite everything we've learned, despite all our technology, despite all our progress, the oldest mystery remains the same. We know we're here. We know we won't be forever. And somewhere between those two facts, humans created meaning. Perhaps that's what makes us unique. Not that we die, everything dies, but that we know it. And somehow, we keep moving forward anyway.